So Russell, Voddie, a lot of Christians seem to lose their footing when they're talking with a neighbor about homosexuality, in trying to explain why it's wrong. I mean, they know how to quote maybe a couple Bible verses, but explaining the wrongness of it, especially when the response is, well, it's not hurting anybody, so how could it be wrong if it's not harming anybody? What would you guys say to that?
Well, I would say, first of all, you have to ask, what is this for? What is sexuality for? And so if we believe that God designed this, then that means that there's a purpose to it. And the complementarity of a man and a woman in a marriage relationship, fidelity, one flesh, that stands behind the whole reason for the design of sexuality. It's not just an individual matter. It's something that has to do with binding those two together in connection with future generations and with the generations that have come before. So it's kind of a big picture discussion about why do we even have sex? Well, what's the purpose here? And then the other problem is what a lot of our gay and lesbian neighbors assume is that we have marriage and we're wanting to restrict this marriage and we're not wanting them to have it. So we're wanting to keep something to ourselves. What we're saying is not, we don't want you to be able to get married. We're saying that same-sex marriage is impossible based upon what sexuality and what marriage is. So it's not that we're trying to disappoint our neighbors. We're saying this is for the good of human flourishing, and we love you. That's the reason why not only do we say that we think there's some restrictions for you, there's some restrictions on us in terms of what this looks like.
Yeah, and there always have been.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point. And I think people also need to understand two things. One, we say it's not harming anybody. It's me in my bedroom. Well, the current debate about marriage explodes that myth. This is not private. This is pressing upon culture as a whole. And because they framed it in civil rights language, it means that this is the greatest farce ever. You can go ahead and practice your religion. This has nothing to do with you practicing your religion. If this is a civil rights issue, and if us not doing weddings for homosexuals or not hiring homosexuals becomes violating civil rights, then it is not conceivable that the church will be unharmed by this. So that myth is exploded. This is not private. This is public. The other thing is that all legal decisions are based on principles and established precedent. And right now the principle is, sort of the Beatles mentality. All you need is love. Well, if that's the case, if marriage is based on popular opinion and who loves each other, the 50-year-old man and the 12-year-old boy, the man and his daughter, so on and so forth. And everybody say, oh, red herring. No, not once the principle is established. So this is not private, and it doesn't stop here.
Yeah, I think we ought to even challenge the principle that just because something doesn't harm, that takes it out of the realm of morality. If you cheat on your wife, and she never finds out about it, and you lie about it, is it wrong? And I think most people would say yes, because lying is inherently wrong. And then the other thing is realizing that a lot of times harm does not reveal itself immediately. If you are violent towards someone, that's an immediate effect. But you have to look at the long-term effect of the harm. And for as long as there's been human history, you mentioned this, Voddie, that the sanctuary into which families have been brought forward has been a monogamous relationship between two opposite genders where they learn to love the other, and that is what the Creator called marriage. The Achilles heel right now of I think of the homosexual so-called marriage debate is just the utter lack of monogamy. That's something that's not really in that. And so once you start tearing down the otherness of marriage, the sanctuary of monogamy, that lifelong faithfulness into which a family arises, the harmful effect may not be demonstrably immediate, but I think you'll see it. And I think a lot of surveys start to bear that out.
Well, one of the things I think that we need to recognize is that the language that's being used here is language that we have already surrendered to. One of the reasons why this is such a confusing thing for a lot of evangelical teenagers is because we have been talking as though marriage is an individual matter between two people. Our wedding ceremonies, couples are writing their own vows. They're dictating the terms, and this is our big day where we're celebrating our love. And that's not what marriage is in a Christian context. And so even when for a long time you've had in Christian churches couples who are newly married, and the people are coming by and saying, now make sure that you wait a long time before you have children so that you're able to enjoy one another.
Right.
As though you can't enjoy one another
Right.
raising up children together. Well, you're already
Right.
surrendering to the terms that the rest of the culture says, well, if that's what marriage is celebrating a relationship between two people. We have a relationship. Why shouldn't we do this? So I think we've got to back up and reclaim in our own churches a longer, bigger definition of what marriage is and start grounding that back in Ephesians 5 rather than the ways that we've accommodated.
So maybe related to this, what role does the church have right now in speaking about this issue? I mean, there's some who say this discussion's lost. We just need to let the world be the world, and we'll just focus on the church. I mean,
You know, the fact of the matter is we're in this world, although we're not of this world. The fact of the matter is the church is the pillar and the ground of truth. And we don't take the truth and hide it under a bushel. That's not the church. We don't live these completely separate, sort of bifurcated lives. That we are the light of the world. We are the salt that preserves. And so it's just completely, it's inconceivable that we would not speak to this issue.
I had a pastor tell me not long ago, he said, why don't we just say, let's allow everybody to redefine marriage on the outside, and we'll just maintain Christian marriage on the inside of the church. And I said, well, we tried that with the divorce culture.
Yeah.
And what happens? We wind up with churches that have said, we're just going to allow this to take place, no fault divorce on the outside, not speak to it, and then speak to it internally, and that collapses into the church. It transforms the nature of the church, number one. Number two, it's not loving to neighbor. We have an accountability to one another. Divorce hurts kids, hurts families, hurts the entire social fabric. So does the expanding out of marriage to where marriage doesn't mean anything anymore.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why the state is involved in marriage in the first place. State doesn't have anything to do with registering people as friends. Doesn't have anything to do with those things. It has an interest in male-female marriage because male-female marriage can lead to something very dangerous for the state, and that is children. And the state has to say, who is the father of this child? Who's accountable for paying for this child? That's the distinction there.
And you think also the spiritual danger. I mean, just thinking of the role of the church as priest in the community. 1 Corinthians 6, those who practice such things cannot inherit the kingdom of God. This is in many ways a gospel issue because we fail to preach here.
Absolutely.
I think of John the Baptist. I've thought about him in this culture. I mean, just think about the absurdity of his death, and you can hear the critics today say, well, see, that's what you get from messing around in politics.
Right.
Of course Herod's going to sleep with his brother's wife because they're the world. We got the world be the world.
Yeah. Why are you surprised?
Right.
That just kills me when people, why are you surprised? Like,
Jesus called him the greatest prophet that had ever lived. Up until his time. And you think of where is the spirit of John the Baptist who, are we willing to, the spirit of John the Baptist's the spirit of John the Baptist's enemies is at work within them today, but where is the John the Baptist in our culture?
Let me say quickly, and a hearty amen to that, but thank you for addressing what I think are two core issues as it relates to responding to the culture. Because they say, on the one hand, well, now you guys are concerned, but nobody says anything about divorce. That's a flat-out lie. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, and there's a long paper trail of us, talking about this and dealing with this for a long time. And the second thing is Christians, and both of you have hit on this, Christians either saying, well, why are you surprised? That's them, this is us. Or saying, well, the state has no business and no place in marriage. And I think you just succinctly addressed
Nobody
that.
believes that.
Yeah, it's
unless you have children who are abandoned on the side of the road, and the state has no interest. If that's the kind of world you want to live in, then that's the case. But that's not the world anyone wants to live in. I mean, not even the Roman Empire was that bad off. And so we have to have the state coming in, even just at the level of adjudicating between people. What Solomon had to do, or who do these babies belong to?
A woman who's abandoned.
Yeah, exactly.
What do we do? Somebody's responsible when a woman's abandoned, and that becomes a judicial issue there. And I think what people are trying to say is the state doesn't have the authority to define marriage. And
that's exactly right.
And I'll go there, but they have to acknowledge what the definition is.
That's a good point. This is a discussion that needs to happen. It's probably going to need to happen a lot more on local church levels, as people have got to get aware of why this is wrong and what it is. So I appreciate the wisdom you gentlemen share.
Thank you.